You know what's fascinating about religious practices? Studies show that 85% of people who identify as religious admit to going through motions without feeling genuine spiritual connection. Today, we're exploring a powerful ancient text that tackles this exact problem.
That's such an interesting statistic. It really connects to this passage from Matthew 15, where Jesus confronts the gap between external practices and internal reality.
Well, what really jumps out is how these religious leaders traveled over 60 miles just to challenge Jesus about hand washing rituals. I mean, imagine being so invested in a tradition that you'd make a multi day journey just to confront someone about it.
Hmm. And these weren't just simple hygiene practices, right? The text mentions they had this elaborate system where people would keep special water jars by their beds just to maintain ritual purity.
Exactly. And here's what's really telling. These leaders had created this complex tradition called Korban that actually let them avoid taking care of their aging parents while appearing super religious. Talk about missing the point entirely.
So, what exactly was this Corbin practice? How did it work?
Well, you could basically declare your assets as dedicated to God, but still use them yourself. It was like a religious loophole that let you say, sorry, can't help you, mom and dad. This money is set aside for God, while still keeping control of your wealth. Pretty convenient, right?
That's exactly the kind of thing Jesus was calling out when he quoted Isaiah about honoring God with lips while hearts are far away.
And then, this is where it gets really interesting. Right after exposing this empty religiosity, Matthew shows us this incredible contrast with the Canaanite woman. Here's someone who had zero religious status, but showed authentic faith.
You know what strikes me about her story? The raw authenticity of her approach. No pretense, just desperate need and persistent faith.
Right. And historical context makes this even more powerful. Canaanites were considered ancient enemies of Israel, yet she approaches Jesus with this remarkable humility, even accepting being compared to a dog eating crumbs.
That level of persistence really paid off. The text says her daughter was healed instantly.
And then Jesus does something fascinating. He feeds 4,000 people in Gentile territory. This is completely separate from the feeding of the 5,000 we see earlier. Different location, different crowd, different symbolic meaning entirely.
Well, that really challenges the assumption that Jesus' ministry was exclusively focused on Jewish people, doesn't it?
Absolutely fascinating point. And here's what many people miss. Matthew was writing primarily to a Jewish audience, yet he deliberately includes these stories that expand their understanding of God's plan. It's like he's saying, your religious boundaries, they're too small.
That's such a powerful message for today. We still struggle with creating religious systems that can actually prevent genuine spiritual connection.
You know, recent studies in religious psychology show that people who focus primarily on external religious practices often report lower levels of life satisfaction compared to those who emphasize internal spiritual development.
That really brings it full circle to where we started, this gap between external practice and internal reality.
And here's the key takeaway that's still relevant. Jesus wasn't interested in abolishing religious practices entirely. He was pointing to something deeper, this transformation that begins in the heart and works its way outward.
Hmm. And that's really the challenge for all of us, isn't it? Moving beyond surface level engagement to something more authentic.
Well, looking ahead, I think we're seeing a growing recognition in religious communities that authentic faith requires both internal transformation and external expression. It's not either or, it's both and.